Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video, I'm going to be giving feedback for Delves for the War Within, the entire expansion. Delves were obviously a new feature in the War Within, and we've had now almost the entire expansion to do them. And of course, I recently did a video about my own personal story with Delves, and this had gotten such a great response and a lot of comments, and it's making me feel like, okay, let's give actual feedback for Delves, because these are beloved by a large amount of people. So let's make sure that they stay good, because I think a lot of us agree that they're pretty good already. So let's make sure they stay good and look forward to midnight. As you know, we should be getting a lot more Delves, right? In midnight, I would hope so, at least. And of course, the midnight alpha was also announced before I made this video. That's going to be coming out soon. I won't be in the alpha, but when I get to the beta, I will try to keep all the delvers in mind and try to test out all the different delves and give feedback about those delves while I'm testing it, as I'm sure many of you will. If you pre-order, you get the beta or whatever. So I'm sure many people can also do that as well. And in this video too, you can leave your comments below with your opinions on feedback, because at the end of the day, these are just going to be my opinions on the feedback of the delves. So you can give your own feedback as well for the delves. So and then of course Legion Remix is going to be starting here soon too. So I wanted to make sure, while I have this on my mind, let's give this feedback out before the alpha starts, before Legion Remix starts, which is where I'll probably be at. And so, we can go ahead and get started on that feedback now. So the first thing I want to start with is a big question when delves were first created was who are these for? I remember hearing that a lot. And at the time, it was from a lot of people. Now you're only hearing that from kind of one community, which is fine, which is going to be like the min-maxing community. I don't know what to call it, because it's not the 1%. It's a lot more than 1%. The 1% is actually like 10% or 20%, right, of the population. But like the people who really care about min-maxing, who the gear from here doesn't really... from doing delves doesn't really matter that much, right? Unless the trinkets were overpowered for a certain season or whatever. The gear from the delves doesn't really matter very much, and therefore, it's pointless to them to do in their minds or whatever. But outside of that community, what we have is a bunch of other people coming together and saying, hey, these are actually for us. Some examples of people delves are for. Delves are for people who don't have a lot of time to play. Maybe you don't have very much time to play the game at all, so you never got invested in Mythic Plus because you knew you were never going to push it. You never got invested in raiding because you can't make the raid times. But now you actually have a way to increase your character's power level very casually and on your own time, without a time limit as well inside the delves. And you have a way to do that now, and that can be very valuable. So that's like one group of people. Another group of people, my last video, I mentioned my son. They're for young people trying to learn the game. Perfect. There's no time limit. No one's going to kick you out of the dungeon because your DPS is too low, and you have a way to learn the game. Older people had a comment. 60-year-old guy. I can't keep up with raids anymore. Can't keep up with Mythic Plus anymore, but I can still power up my character through delves. Very good. People with either disabilities or just like impairments or whatever, like hand issues, wrist issues. The other stuff might be a little bit too challenging. Maybe they need to take breaks. You can't take a break in the middle of a pull. You can't take a break of a raid pull, right? Or even your raid night, make 19 other people wait for you. You can't take a break in the middle of a Mythic Plus on a time key, but you can finish off a pull in a delve and take a break because your wrist hurts, right? That's just a reality. And so that type of person. Then there's just people who are just casual players as well. They just aren't into the stress or that type of feeling of doing really hard content, and so therefore those people as well. And that what that amounts to at the end of the day is a ton of people. So who our delves ended up being for was for a very large number of people. It wasn't just for one group. It's not something very specific like pet battles. Like pet battles are for that. There's a whole community of pet battlers, believe it or not. But that's a very specific group of people who pet battles are for. Whereas delves seem to be for a much larger group of people, which is very good and very valuable. And that means that, it kind of hit the mark. One thing I wanted to add on who it's for, though, is the solo bosses, the major boss of each season, right? So we had like Zekvir, I believe that's his name, the old god guy from the first season. We had the goblin from the second season. I'm terrible with names. Kaiveza from this season. I do remember Kaiveza's name. And these things have been great. Caiveza in particular is probably the mark that you want to aim for going forward. And what these are something that not only do the delvers like these as well as like stretch goal challenges to get done at some point during the season, but these are like mini challenges for the beginning of the season for those high end players trying to do it in their previous season's gear. And Caiveza in particular was tuned extremely well and able to be done in a certain way to where it wasn't overwhelming. You just had to keep doing the mechanics perfectly for a long time, and you could do it. And it was very hard. I mean, I myself did it that first week, and it was very difficult. Didn't matter all the gear I had. It was so very, very rough. But it was very, very fun as well. And so there even is a part of delves, those solo boss challenges, that even affect the high-end community in a very positive way. And it also creates very good PR. Because while very often the high-end community is called like the 1%ers or whatever, but the reality is it's more than 1% of the population likely that is doing, you know, some sort of high-end content, what you might refer to as high-end content. You know, and you know, everybody has their own fractional percentage or whatever, but it's likely larger than 1%, even though we kind of call them the 1%ers. And this is very good. Like when their spokespeople, their content creators are saying, hey, this is really good. This makes the entire system of delves is worth it just because of these bosses. You know, that's very good PR. It's very good, like getting other people to support. So if you like delves, you should want other people to support the delves as well and say that they're a good thing. And having these very, very challenging but cool bosses is a good way to go about that. So there's almost something for literally everybody if you look at the entire delve system as a whole. So, I mean, what a great hit as far as that goes. And I'd hope to see that going forward into Midnight, right? Continue the bosses, you know, have them be very challenging at the start, maybe get nerfed over time with gear. And then, you know, keep everything else relatively the same. We can talk about some changes later on in the video, but you know, we're in a good starting spot to say the least, I would say. So next, let's talk about what works and what doesn't work. So like mechanics, the settings of the delves, puzzles in the delves. Let's talk about these things. So these are the things I think of, like what works and what doesn't work. I don't think so much in terms of like what mobs work, what mobs don't work. I think that's all up to interpretation. I think the only mob that I really, really dislike were some of the ones actually, I wish I knew exactly what delve it is that they're in, but it's one of the ones that used to be underwater. And there's one that has like a harpoon that can harpoon you from like a million miles away. And there's also a dot that one can put on you that just becomes like unlivable or something like that if you can't dispel it or take it off yourself. That was really rough. So there's some things like that I don't like. That makes these random mobs that are not even elite just feel like almost invulnerable or unstoppable. But other than that, I don't have too much of an interest in talking about mobs. Bosses are a different thing, like end bosses. I think those are a big part of what makes a delve cool. But first, let's talk about the setting, right? So I'm in one of the ones where I like the setting the most. So that's why I chose to be in here, right? So this setting, I love this setting. This looks cool, even from this angle, right? This looks so cool. Like, I mean, what a great job by, you know, whoever made this, because it just looks cool, right? It's very neat setting. I love being like, you're in a delve, so you're kind of underground. It's kind of like a dungeon setting, right? And most of the delves completely accomplish this. Earthcrawl Mines is another one of my favorite, even though it's kind of maybe generic looking, you could say, or something. But I like Earthcrawl Mines a lot too. Some of the ones I didn't like as much were the Ashkahet ones. I didn't mind the gameplay of them, but maybe I didn't like the feel of them as much because you were like it felt more like a dungeon. And it's not that it can't feel like a dungeon. It's just that I think this is like, again, this is like peak delve scenery for me, right? And you can have different opinions in that. But I love that. I love like getting around in different unique ways, like whether it's the teleportation devices that are sometimes in this one, the mushrooms that you're jumping on to get from place to place inside this one. You know, I think maybe in the Earthcrawl Mines, obviously that one's a lot more straightforward, but maybe like riding in the mine carts to get places, maybe more secret areas and ones like that. If you have one like the Earthcrawl Mines, that you have to like ride a minecart through a wall or something to get to a secret spot, you know, just interesting things like that. I would just continue building on something that's already here, basically, essentially, that you already kind of have going for you. I love when some of the treasures that were hidden underwater. I would love to see even more of that kind of thing. It doesn't even have to be treasures, but just like more hidden stuff underwater, even if it's like Easter eggs. Sometimes I think a lot of players love Easter eggs. Maybe like even Easter eggs underwater, maybe a reference to a quest that was near that delve, anything like that. Just the scenery is already good. I would just try to build upon the things that are already working for people. What works for me personally is being underground, unique ways to get around, like the mushrooms, for example, having different mediums, having different layers, like different elevations, having water to swim into. I don't want to be underwater the entire delve, but maybe diving underwater to get something or whatever. I think that's kind of neat. Obviously, you could do one where you were floating or something as well, if you really wanted to, as long as it didn't hamper the gameplay too much. But as far as setting goes, that's what I think of when I think of like a perfect delve setting, is something like this. Obviously, the underwater ones didn't really work very well. They had to change those. Hopefully they don't go back to that. Really, I didn't like the whole breathing system. If you can do an underwater one and even keep like the underwater running mechanic or whatever, but you'd have to get rid of the breath thing, in my opinion, for it to really work. It was way too stressful. It shouldn't be that stressful in a delve. It was more, as someone who does high keys and cutting edge rating, it was actually more stressful. Trying to go get my air back, especially if I was on an alt character that couldn't kill stuff instantly, like on this one. Having to run back and get air was very, very stressful. So, obviously that wasn't the best part of it, but some of the other parts of the underwater ones were fine. I liked seeing out into the sea and have the sharks being able to come attack you if you got too close to the ocean. Like, some of the stuff was cool in them. It was just the breath thing that wasn't the best, in my opinion. So we have the setting, interesting mechanics. So, as far as interesting mechanics, part of that would be jumping around on the mushrooms, for example. Like I said, adding more of that kind of stuff. Obviously, some of the stories themselves introduce mechanics, like you have a special button that does something. I know, like, one of them, you have a special button in it, like makes all the guys that you hit with it stumble around, and then when you defeat them, they blow up, and they actually can do damage to the enemies as well. Like, even the stuff like that's cool. Like, make it make sense with the story. That's all stuff I would continue to build on. Again, none of this stuff has to be in every single delve by any means, but these are just like things that you want to think about when you're creating a delve, in my opinion. Just having some sort of interesting mechanic to do, even if it's just something small, like jumping on mushrooms, and maybe have it be like actually like beneficial. Like, ooh, if I take this, and maybe even make a difficult mushroom path. Like, oh, if I jump on these mushrooms perfectly, I can get a special power at the top or something, right? Like, there's stuff like that I think that you could mix in a little bit more. The last thing in this part I want to talk about was like the puzzles. So I think the puzzles kind of went by the wayside over time. They were probably supposed to be a bigger part of it, and I'm guessing because not everybody's good at puzzles, first of all. So like when you have a puzzle right in your face and you can't solve it, that's going to be frustrating, because then you don't get that power or whatever. And so maybe that's why they went away from it. The ones with the pipes, they can seem to completely punt on those. I actually like the pipe ones, but that is probably the most difficult version of a puzzle that they put in the delves, was the pipe ones. So I kind of see why they went away from it. What I would say with that is, I kind of agree that if I walk into this delve and there's a puzzle right here in front of me and I can't get it or whatever, then that's extremely frustrating. But kind of like I mentioned with the mushrooms or something, maybe put puzzles in very hard to get places that are out of the way. So people who want to do the puzzles can go seek them out and get their power from completing a puzzle. And people who don't have to go do that, don't have to go seek it out. And it's not right in their face, like, hey, you can't solve this, whatever. And then continue to have ones that are more on an easier difficulty that are right in front of you, but maybe harder ones that are put further away. I personally love doing the puzzles and the delves. Obviously, for me, I'm a sicko. I'm part of the secret finding community. Okay, I would love if the puzzles were extremely hard. I would love if there was a 50-step puzzle that I had to swim underwater to go do or something, right? Like, I'm a sicko when it comes to that. So I'm not the best gauge on that for the whole community, but I love the puzzles personally. And, I would love to see more of it, but I also understand not putting them right in everyone's face, especially if they're going to be a little bit more difficult, because it just, nobody wants to be slapped in the face with something that they either can't do or struggle to do, etc. Right? Nobody wants to just be slapped in the face with that. I totally get that. I don't like that either. Like I'm good at puzzles, but there's things I'm bad at, right? And I don't want to be like, haha, you can't do this, right in my face either. So I totally get it when it comes to that. The next thing I want to talk about was Bran and the Curios. Obviously, we have a new companion coming in Midnight. I think Bran overwent a lot of changes throughout the expansion. I think he's in a pretty decent spot now. So obviously, he can tank, heal, or DPS. Without getting too into the weeds with it and too nerdy with it, I almost think that like when he's a tank, maybe he should have slightly more survival than he has now. Before, he had too much. When he first had tank specialization, he had too much survivability, honestly. But maybe he should have slightly more survival as a tank, but even less damage as a tank than what he currently has. Just to really help the less experienced players, the very casual players, the very like my son, for example, very young player. He would be greatly benefited if Bran could live a little bit longer against mobs, even at higher level delves. But again, it doesn't need to be overpowered by any means. The healing Bran is actually really good. I love the different types of heals it gives, and really allows you to play around the heals. You really notice it when you're doing like the solo Casillas, as most specs had to do it as healing, at least at the beginning. I don't know about now. You use them as a healer, and it really allows you to play around the mechanics. The healing Bran is really good in my opinion. DPS Bran, I don't know, just I don't ever really notice him there. Obviously, he actually shows up on the damage meter, which hopefully he shows up on Blizzard's damage meters when they put those out, or the new companion does or whatever, right? And but I don't really notice him too much. So maybe something I would love if there's more ways to interact with Bran or something to do more damage. I also wouldn't want that to be overdone by any means. Maybe like the foot bombs and stuff. So the foot bombs is a trinket, and foot bombs is a power you can get. Maybe Bran could have some abilities like that, where he's like, I'm throwing these bombs down. I think he can do like potions or something, or that kind of stuff. I don't mind, where it's very simple and easy. But other than that, I mean, if you didn't change very much with the companion, I'd be mostly fine with it. I think it's in a pretty decent spot now, and you just tune it as needed. But those are just some things that I could think of. When it comes to the curios, I think by far the most popular curio that I saw mentioned throughout the expansion was the pacifist rig in Season 2. So this is the one where the robot would come down and then you were inside of it and your character was invulnerable and used a big AoE damage. Now, if you weren't in the best gear, so for me, using pacifist rig was not the best thing because it would actually lower my damage. But if you were just like in even like base hero track gear, like this pacifist rig does a lot of damage. And also, what I found was when it was about to launch, I would just go with pull as much stuff as possible because you're invulnerable while you're in it as well, which was very cool for me. But just in the general sense, just people who are just doing it casually, right? Not thinking like, ooh, I can pull as much stuff as I want now. Like a lot of people just really love that. So what I would say is very impactful curios seem to be the most favorite ones. And obviously, you don't want to have the players be in the pacifist rig 100% of the time. It completely trivializes the content. But it was very RNG. It was very random. You couldn't guarantee it to proc and get it. And sometimes it would proc multiple times, like very close together. That was really cool, right? I think that is something to definitely have some version of that type of impact, at least, available to people who love that type of play style, because it's very, very. It's just fun, right? It's a fun way to do it. A lot of people who do this kind of content, they like to be able to like cheese things randomly. And you don't need to be able to cheese the entire delve, the entire experience, but like even random pulls, like, oh man, I would have died if I didn't get that cheese mechanic that popped off there as well there. And then there's one more thing actually I want to talk about with that. And that's and I should have talked about this in the setting. But it's having the environment be able to do damage. That's one of my favorite things in these delves. So in this one, there's spores, right, in a different story, and you stand in the spores and they get bigger and they can explode. They do damage to enemies. We mentioned the one where you can kill the one enemies and when they die they explode. Water pipes that can do damage. The mine carts can do damage in Earthcrawl mines. So like there's a lot of things already like this in there. I think this is a huge hit, and I would love, honestly, if it was even more of a playstyle. So in this one with the spores, there's so many of them, and they respawn when you have the spore story active. That I'm sure many players have realized, wow, I can just use the spores to do all the damage basically in those. I would love if you could like not necessarily increase the damage, but maybe just increase the ability, maybe increase the hitbox for, like, for example, for the mine carts in Earthcrawl mines, at least for the enemies. I don't know how you would do that without, you know, affecting the player as well. But just having other abilities, having different ways to solve the content, right? So for me, I turn off Pacifist Rig if I'm on my main character because I do more damage without it. But on my ults, I play Pacifist Rig. But with any character, like if the environment's doing enough damage, I'm going to use the environment to do damage. And not everybody wants to play that way, but just having it as an option is actually kind of cool. Again, I think you just have to get to the point where it's not trivializing the content to where, oh, I can gather up the entire delve and one-shot it with a minecart. Okay, that's, you know, that would be cool the first time you do it, of course. But obviously that kind of, it completely trivializes the entire experience. But at the same time, it would be cool if I was skilled enough to kite and interrupt and use immunities, use my own abilities to gather up 10 mobs and have them slowly get knocked out by the minecart. You know, that's kind of cool. And that's something you can kind of do already. It's just a very arduous process in here. However, with the spores in this delve, it's actually quite easy to do that. So I think having more of that is good. More of that as an option. The spores are almost forced because they're everywhere, but having it as an option is just kind of cool in my opinion. So that's another thing I'd like to see as well. Another thing I wanted to talk about was the gearing. So let's talk about the gearing. That's one of the last things I wanted to talk about. So obviously in delves, you can get hero track gear pretty easily from the Delver's Bounty and then from your vault, right? So by doing delves, you can get full hero track gear pretty easily. You can also get some mythic crafted gear by getting gilded crests from doing the +11s. Obviously, that's a stretch goal for some people. Some people maybe don't do +11s because it's too hard or too annoying or whatever. But it is something you can do. I really like where it's at right now. This is another thing that has evolved over the expansion. I know there is some pushback from the high-end community saying, get rid of the gilded crests from delves. They shouldn't have the gear you have. It is, trust me, having the cap on, it's a good thing in my opinion. I don't know if the cap's at the right number or not, but I like that there's a cap because the reality is no one's going to be, I shouldn't say no one, very few people are going to be full, you know, gilded in this season, right? Gilded crest crafted even at the end of the season, right? Because you can only get a certain amount per week. So like very few people are going to have that. It's not anything I would worry about. I like where it's at right now. I love having that stretch goal of gilded stuff to get just from doing delves while mostly having like hero track stuff. And, you know, crests are not super easy to get in here, which I also think is fine. But yeah, I generally like where it's at. I would maybe even think about increasing runed crest acquisition in the delves from where it is now. And gilded's probably close to where it should be, but I could hear arguments on either side of that. Mostly from, probably not either side. I could hear arguments on increasing it. Maybe not by a ton, but I probably wouldn't decrease it at all. I definitely wouldn't get rid of it. It's a very nice stretch goal to have. And tier 11s aren't super easy. Especially not, you know, like they're easier for certain specs and classes than others, sure. But, you know, they're not super easy content. In my opinion, a tier 11 delve, depending on what delve and what story it is harder than a mythic +7, right? And like a mythic +7, I can go in my gear and I can almost guarantee you I'm going to time that key just from me being in there. And I can almost guarantee I'm going to do a tier 11 too. But what I'm just saying is the difficulty of those is not very different. It's at least in the realm. It's in the ballpark of each other. So I would not want to get rid of that. The only other thing I would say is maybe, I don't even know, maybe being able to target tier pieces better in delves. Of course, okay, there's a whole issue with that, right? Because then all of a sudden Mythic Plusers and stuff are going to feel like they need to do it. I don't know what the answer to that is. Maybe also just having a way for Mythic Plus players to target tier pieces. Obviously, we can just wait for the catalyst at this point. It's not a huge deal. And I know they like to keep raid, have its own special perks, and you can get your tier faster from raid, obviously. Maybe just something though. Obviously, they did the trinkets, special delve trinkets that are unique to delves. Something more along those lines. So maybe tiers out of the question, right? But maybe just special delve things, maybe special delve set bonus on rings or something like that. I could see that. Just special delve gear that you can save up for, right? Maybe it costs a high amount of the undercoin or whatever the new currency will be. I'm not a developer. I don't have all the solutions here. But the only thing I would really change for the gearing is maybe have some specific delve oriented goals with your gear, because right now the delve gear feels a little bit arbitrary or whatever. It's just random gear that drops in here, and it's green, blue, purple, but it's like all kind of the same gear, except for the trinkets. So maybe there could be some special gear, some cantrip stuff that only works in delves, right? Delve specific cantrips or something like that, or cantrip that is more defensive minded and not overpowered. But it's like, and the highest level you could get it at is hero track. And since it's not overpowered, you wouldn't wear it for a plus 20 key or for, race to world first or something like that. There's plenty of ways to keep the power in balance. I don't have to sit there and say them all, but just maybe some more specific delve stuff that makes it feel special or unique to delves, maybe I should say. And that's probably about what I feel about on the gearing aspect of it. Obviously, there's a lot of other aspects maybe we could get into, but overall, I think that's pretty good feedback for the War Within on Delves. I'm looking forward to Midnight. I am looking forward to Delves in Midnight. I'm hoping, I always assume, I think they said so on one of the announcements, that there's going to be a bunch more new Delves. Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully they continue doing the different stories, updating stories throughout the expansion, adding new delves with the patches. This is a content that's being done by so many people. I said before, I would love to see the data on it. I'm sure a lot of these are getting done. Maybe not as many as Mythic Plus, but even if not, it's probably somewhere in the ballpark. It's a lot. It's a lot of people doing these delves, and it might fall off as the season goes, but probably early on, there's probably a lot of people doing these and having fun doing them, I would imagine as well. So looking forward to Midnight. Just want to see more of the same thing. I will be testing it on the beta whenever that comes out. I will keep the delvers in mind, as I said on the other delve video. My channel, if you are a new viewer, my channel is not mostly, but very largely Ret Paladin focused, because that's what I play at a high level, is Ret Paladin. I also do secret finding stuff. I really love the secret finding community. I also do new stuff, but I will try to keep the delvers in mind going forward in everything that I do, and talk about different delve stuff and continue to do very specific delve type guides when the need comes up. I wanted to also just, if you're a viewer who was from that other delve video talking about my son, thank you guys so much for all the support and wonderful comments from that. There's no words to really express how validating that feels when you get very nice comments, especially when you're being a little bit vulnerable and you're worried that the very negative part of the community might find the video first instead of a bunch of very positive people who ended up finding it first. So thank you guys so much for that as well. That meant a lot to me. So I will always keep the delvers in mind going forward on all my content. Just know that I do a bunch of different types of content. Thanks for subscribing if you already subscribed. And I appreciate it very much. Speaking of which, as the video is over, the biggest way you can help me is to subscribe if you are not already subscribed. If you're a subscriber or a longtime viewer, or longtime subscriber, longtime viewer, I do encourage you to check out the Patreon. And other than that, everybody have a good one.